Hello and welcome to the CivilTalk Podcast. I'm your host, Tapasio Altaus. If you're new to the show, this is where we explore civility and social emotional learning with esteemed guests, expert insights, and practical advice to help people navigate the world. Today, we have a very special guest on the show, Dr. Lorea Martínez Pérez. Dr. Martinez is the award-winning founder of Heart and Mind, a company dedicated to helping schools and organizations integrate social-emotional learning into their everyday practices. She is also the author of the book, Teaching with the Heart and Mind, a Complete Educator's Guide to Social-Emotional Learning, which teaches educators the impact of emotions and resilience on learning outcomes. Dr. Martinez is also a faculty member at Columbia University's Teachers College, where she teaches aspiring principals the importance of emotional intelligence. Her extensive research in SEL focuses on how principals and educators can create emotionally intelligent learning environments. Today, we'll be discussing her work, her vision for SEL in schools and beyond, and how leaders can incorporate EI to transform learning communities. We are thrilled to welcome Dr. Lorea Martínez Pérez to the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah. So I'd love to get started on your journey in SEL and what inspired you to found Heart and Mind.
Yes. So I started my career as a special education teacher, and I did special education and general ed for several years. And when I had just started my doctoral program, I moved from Spain to the US, and I finished all my research here in the United States. At the time, I started working, and I was working for a charter management organization, and I did special ed for a few years, but then transitioned to data and assessment. And as I was working in data and assessment and with a background in special education, I realized that we were not paying attention to something, a set of skills that students needed in order to be successful learners, to be able to cope with the sometimes the struggles of being in classrooms where they were reading several grade levels below. And that's how I came across the field of social emotional learning. I didn't know it at the time. I came to it more as an intuition of these are a set of skills that we are not paying attention to when we are trying to support students to be
Mhm.
successful learners. And as I was doing my research and trying to determine what would be the focus of my dissertation, I realized, wow, there is a field, there has been studies being done, and there is a name for it, is social emotional learning. And I really fell in love with it. I spent 2 years studying how teachers' practice change over time as they were implementing an SEL curriculum. And from there, I really wanted to do this work. I knew that it was very impactful. I had seen the impact not only on students, but also on teaching practice. And I wanted
Right.
to support other educators and schools to do that. So that's when I started my own consulting business. And after 10 years supporting schools, that's how Heart and Mind came about. And we can talk about it more in a little bit, but it's a model, it's a methodology, it's its own thing.
Right. I really love your website. Actually, I was really taken aback. It's Heart and Mind. And on the first page, talking about wanting to work with you, it says you can reclaim your joy as an educator and feel more at peace and productive in your work and in your life. And I really like the idea, and you don't see this too often, really supporting teachers' emotional well-being. And I feel like you don't really see that a lot. And I also eventually want to become an educator and a teacher. And one thing that I hear a lot with teachers and educators is just emotional burnout. Um, and I like that you really approach that, and you approach the emotions of educators, because it's important that their well-being is well kept so that they can do their job appropriately. And I'd love to hear more about your experience with educators and any one-on-one case study you had with people, um, just to hear about, the zeitgeist of the educational system, not only in the US, but also internationally.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. And I'll answer in two ways. First about my own personal journey and then how that has impacted my work. So when I started working in SEL after doing my dissertation, I thought that I would be really supporting schools to do implementation well. I thought that I was going to be doing a technical assistance and really helping schools to select a program and implement with rigor and all those aspects, and just training teachers how to do this well. But while I was doing this work, I realized that many educators didn't have the skills themselves for their own practice, for their own teaching, let alone to teach students how to identify your emotions or regulate, stress or prepare for a big project, right? And that's when the focus of my work changed a little bit, and I started focusing a lot more on the adults and how adults are practicing the skills. And we know that these skills are like the skills of emotional intelligence are supporting effectiveness
Mhm.
when we are able to navigate the emotional pathways, I would say, of being a teacher. We can be more focused, more motivated, but they also impact what kinds of relationships we have in the workplace. If you imagine yourself being completely stressed all the time, it's going to be hard for you to really connect with other educators and to really bring your best self into the workplace. So, by
Mm.
supporting educators to really do this work for themselves first, as a tool
Right.
that they have for their own well being, for their own finding that calm space where they can be themselves. That's what we see that impacts students in the classroom. So then, since I started doing this work, we have had a lot of research done in the aspect of teacher social emotional skills. And what the research has shown is that the abilities, these predispositions that teachers have, impact students in the classroom and also how teachers set up the learning environment. So in other words and in summary, like when we are supporting educator well-being, we're actually impacting students and we're also impacting the learning environment.
I love that so much, and that, like, truly just gave me the chills, um, because a lot of research focuses just on the students, and again, I'm gonna reiterate just your focus on educators, and I love that too so much because it gets down to the root problem, in education is, it's the educators, like, we need to, like, really hold a safe space for our educators. With that being said, I'd love to, and I'm sure our listeners too would love to hear more about the actual program itself. From what I've researched on your website and through your book, it's a 3-step process for integrating SEL into lesson planning. And I'd love just for you to shed some light on that, and walk us through that actual process of what that looks like when you are sort of doing your work with educators.
Yes. So to take a step back for a moment, so when we think about SEL in the classroom with students, and the teaching with the heart in mind entails teaching the skills to students, right? And HEART is an acronym that identifies 5 essential social emotional skills. So that's one aspect. There's another aspect that is the educator taking care of their SEL skills, right? Like really practicing and living the skills. And we briefly mentioned this. And then the third aspect is integrating into what you do in your practice as a teacher, right? And that's the place where I see so many opportunities to bring the work in classrooms where teachers don't see it as this is something else that is being added to my plate, but this is
Mhm.
actually a framework. This is a lens. It's like when I get up in the morning, I put my glasses on. So this is kind of like the educator putting their SEL glasses on because
Love
they
that.
can
Yeah.
teach better and more effectively when they are integrating these skills. So
Mm-hmm.
with the academic lessons, because I've been a teacher and I was asked, go by my principal, or submit your lesson plans. That's like a
Mm-hmm.
low hanging fruit where we can support educators to integrate SEL with something that they are already doing, right? Teachers are already
Mm-hmm.
creating lesson plans for their students. So the three-step process that you mentioned helps educators to ask questions. Really, it's an inquiry process that asks them to identify, for example, if it's a math lesson for fourth graders on fractions, for example, as they are going through their lesson plan, to inquire in what places will students need to use their SEL skills. And once you
Right.
have done work for a little bit, you'll quickly realize that there are many opportunities for students to practice this skill, because anytime you put a problem in front of a student, they might have an emotional reaction. We have students in classrooms that love math, and that's their happy place. And we also have students that are scared of the subject because nobody
Right.
has helped them work through the emotional hurdles or the emotional reactions
Oh.
that they have when they are presented with a multi-step problem. So the
Mm-hmm.
educator can anticipate some of that emotional baggage, if you will, that students may bring from their prior experiences in math, and really
Right.
talk about like how you can set up yourself for success as a learner, right? So that is related to the academic content because it's subject specific, but it's a way to support your students to be more successful. So by the time they are really solving that problem, they can really focus on that instead of being distracted by the emotions that they may experience. So that's one example. Another example is really thinking about learning as a social and emotional process. So a lot of the good pedagogy we have in classrooms today asks students to work in groups. Well, if you ask an educator, how do you help students work in groups? Many
Mm-hmm.
say, like, I don't, right? So
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot that goes on in two, three individuals working together to create a project or write a story together, right? So what SEL does is it helps students to more explicitly work in groups, so then they can be successful with the academic content because they have that foundation of SEL skills.
Wow. That's really amazing. And while talking about this, I'm thinking about my college years and how much it would have been great to have, you know, um, better as because groups are, huge in college atmospheres, and you're talking about 4-year-olds right now, and just the power of teaching this 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, are it's immense. And really needs to be integrated more. But while you were talking about this, I was thinking about, parents too. It's one step to have educators do this and do this in the classroom. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are when students leave the classroom, and how do you get parents involved in this program as well to make sure that what they're learning in the classroom is also held up in a consistent manner also at home.
Yes, parents are a key piece of this puzzle. And I was so glad that you had my friend and colleague Jennifer Miller in the show a
Oh, I
few
love
weeks
Jennifer Miller.
ago.
Oh, that's so great. I
Yes,
love that it's
we have been collaborating for a few years, a dear friend. And parents, I I have two thoughts on that. One, I'm a parent myself, and I know I need help with these skills, even if this is my field of research and practice. So when schools think about this work, just thinking about how we can support parents to also use these skills for themselves as adults, right? If my child is angry and I yell back because I'm reacting to my kid being upset, that's going to escalate a situation. So helping parents to really know how to help their kids better is going to be an such a great support for schools, like bringing parents along to say, oh, these are some tools that can help you at home to deal with
Right.
homework, or how to support your kid who's going through adolescence. There are so many things that schools can do to support parents. And then as they are supporting parents, to also educate them in ways that are healthy for kids, right? Developmentally healthy, where they can help their kids to learn coping strategies and strategies to deal with stress and failure. And but we also there when parents don't know what to do. Sometimes we expect parents to know what to do when situations arise. And I think that when you create that partnership where both school and parents are, walking on the path to really work with students and support their healthy development, that's the kind of dialogue we want to have. But unfortunately, I see many schools that see parents as almost like the enemy, right? Because maybe they
Mm.
are trying to advocate for their kids, or they are not showing up at the parent meetings, and it
Yeah.
creates sometimes a tension. But really bringing parents along, because parents and the US general surgeon just put out a report very recently saying parents are not okay. The levels of stress are increasing, the amount of mental health issues that parents are experiencing are increasing. So parents also need support, and I think schools can become that hub of resources and really a community, that we see it as we are all in a community trying to build the next generation of students in the healthiest ways possible.
Right. Yeah, it's such a complex topic, because I've had friends, family members over advocate for their children when they aren't recognizing a problem, I think self-awareness, is crucial for a lot of parents and for principals and teachers, and that difficult thing to sort of teach older generations, I think sometimes too, is like, are you helping the situation or are you detracting from the situation? But I think that these discussions are really important, so at least at the end of the day you can have parents who are asking themselves these questions, because your program is like very much seems like, in the schools and in the organizations and really to help facilitate. But with parents, they don't, they can choose not to use resources, not, it's like not required all the time. So I'm sure it's difficult sometimes. What I'm trying to say is I'm sure it's difficult with parents sometimes, like having friends who are parents. I'm sure you deal with it very frequently too, having to deal with difficult parents or difficult teachers. How do you get through that? How do you bridge that gap between like having a difficult parent or having a difficult teacher? Because that's sort of the crux of your work. It's not always going to be smooth. There's going to be friction. So how do you get past that? And what are some tips that you can offer parents to make, their children's education a bit smoother?
Yeah, and many times there's what I call resistance to this type of work, right? And that resistance may come from different places. Sometimes the resistance comes from a place of not having enough information. Maybe if you don't really understand the importance of SEL, or what's the impact of these emotional intelligence skills in the development of children, you might say, this is not good for my child, I don't want this. And maybe you just need more information, right? And information brought to you in a way that you can process, right? I think that
Right.
what challenge that we have in the education field is sometimes we have all this jargon, and we have to translate the jargon and to make it into, plain language that people can understand and they can connect, right? And they can say, oh, do I want my child to be happy and be resilient and be a problem solver? Absolutely. Okay, so how do you teach that? And that is through social emotional learning. But then there's
Yeah.
another part of resistance that has an emotional foundation, and that's when in most cases people are scared. And maybe as a parent you are scared because you think that the school is teaching something that you don't know, or maybe you think that the school is pulling your child away from your own values as a family, right? If you're an immigrant family coming to the US, maybe you're afraid that that's going to create you're going to forget about your background, your own home culture, right? So there might be a fear from the parent perspective, but there's also a fear from the teacher, for example. If you think that the parent is stepping on your territory, right? And maybe some fear that the parent is going to tell you what to do, that it's not respecting your profession, your professional boundaries. So there are emotions that sit at the foundation of this resistance that many times show up as anger in the way which we communicate with others. So as an educator, if you're an educator, I would say you have to see what's the parent perspective, right? What is really sitting at the core, at the heart of that parent? They are trying to protect their child, and what is the issue? What is the problem they identify, and can you see that problem from the perspective? And then if you are a parent, also thinking that that teacher has your best interest, the teacher is really trying to do their best for your child, right? You have to start with a positive assumption, and then maybe ask for more information before you judge that that teacher is not good, or that that teacher is not doing what's right for your kid. If you have that evidence, of course you have to do something about it. But I think that the way in which we come to these conversations it tends to be very confrontational at first, and sometimes
Right.
we don't listen for understanding. What we do is listen to be right. We want to prove that we are right. So I think that that's the change of perspective, is like, can we listen to understand each other first, and then we
Right.
can identify what the problem is, right, and how we go about solving it. But you have to be willing to listen, and and be able to put yourself in the other person's shoes, understand the perspective.
I love that. It's like what you mentioned right now is, I mean, that's how you engage in interrelational or interrelational relationship. It's like establishing a tone that this is going to be a discussion where we're learning from each other, and we are not trying to debate each other or trying to solve a problem together. And I think establishing that is so crucial if you're trying to solve a problem, because again, like you're saying, it's so easy to slip into the process of I'm right, you're wrong, and I think it's really crucial for teachers and educators, principals, and parents to, see that there's a bigger issue, and it's, we're looking out for a child's well-being. And I think that can get kind of lost in the phrase sometimes, because, the ego might get in the place or in the way, and that's totally understandable. And, I just want to say thank you for doing all this work, because this sort of reestablishes and puts to the center, like, there's a common goal here and we're trying to do better.
Yeah.
But with that said, I'd love to hear more about your insights on, the digital landscape, because that's more integrated into school systems. And how do you see that reshaping SEL? Is it detracting? Is it making it more? Is it distracting? Is it helping? I'd love to hear how you embrace that, and the challenges of that, and just, the future that you see with the digital learning environment with SEL.
Yeah, well, I think is all of it. Like the verbs that you chose, I think it's a little bit of everything. I think that really the I mean, social media, the use of devices has really changed the way in which youth interact with each other, and even adults, right? Where sometimes you call someone and people are surprised when you use the regular phone call, right, instead of texting. It's like, oh, is everything okay, right? People panic because you are calling. um so it has, I think that a fact is that it has changed the way in which we relate to each other. um and with that, there are some consequences or some side effects, and some of them are positive. I think that it has helped to get information, to get things done faster, to be able to connect with people that are not in your immediate community. It has made us more global and be able to communicate and learn about other things so much faster, and have that presence in some of the work that I do, creating communities of practice. Sometimes we have people that are coming from all over the world, right? And there's an opportunity for from sharing and learning from each other as we are developing our social emotional skills. So that's a beautiful thing that has been possible because of technology. But on the other hand, right, if there's an overuse, or there's becomes an addiction, that can become problematic. And
Right.
you are probably well aware of some of the studies that are coming out, looking at especially in adolescents, and particularly with girls, how it's influencing their sense of self-worth, their self-image, right? And what's happening with how they perceive the social interactions, and how it creates sometimes these like fake reality, right? That perception that everybody else is doing better than me, everybody else has this beautiful life, and I'm here at home, right, with nothing to do, or maybe didn't get an invitation to go out, or whatever that is, and feeling very sorry, and then not having the skills to cope with that, right? Not having the perspective of knowing that that's not the whole story. That might be a piece of the story in someone's life, but it's not the whole story. And I think that we are in kind of this funny place, because it's not just adolescents, like adults are dealing with this as well, right? Adults, we are constantly being bombarded with notifications, so our attention has changed because of that. um, and I think that I'm always not a fan of like saying, okay, so that's, that it has a side effect, just completely ignore it or completely put it away, because we are at a time where we need these tools in order to work, and to do any work requires technology.
Right.
I think it's more of teaching, to really go inwards in order to be able to go outwards, meaning, like, if there's something that you are doing that it's making you unhappy, that is making you feel bad about yourself because you are looking at other people's lives in social media, maybe there's no need to do that, right? But having that moment to stop and think about, like, how is that making me feel, right? And that's part of developing self-awareness, of really being in touch with your emotions, and then going to self-management and saying, you know what, I'm going to make a different choice. Maybe I'm going to go read a book, I'm going to go make myself some food, or whatever that is, right? Engaging yourself in other activities, and not
Mhm.
continue this cycle of engaging in tasks or things that are making you feel bad about yourself, right? It's almost like having
Right.
an alert within yourself to say, oh, if this is making me feel bad, maybe it's not good that I continue to do this, right? But we have to
Right.
teach those things explicitly, and you cannot teach it by telling people move away from social media. It's like how we teach people to use it with limits and boundaries, and to step away from it if it's hurting their mental health before it's too late.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, I am also a victim of doom scrolling, and I'm sure, many teens that, have the same issue as well. I'm excited to see what you're talking about put into classes. You're teaching SEL and, you know, implementing that into classes. I'm excited for sort of everything you're talking about actually putting it into a course in colleges or in K through 12, because technology isn't going anywhere. It's not,
Right.
it's here for the long haul, which is so exciting and empowering, especially as a young woman. And I'm really excited to see younger generations really work with technology. Uh, Technology can be used against you in so many ways, mentally and in your health. And, I'm really excited to see how health classes will, and even SEL classes and programs, are going to implement, wellness in the digital landscape, because we're only going natural connection with the digital world from that. But I'd also just, closing remarks, I'd love to hear just, what piece of advice. I like to close out with this question is, what is one big piece of advice you could give either educators or teachers, parents, students on your work? I'd love to hear just a takeaway for today's discussion and what you want to impart for our listeners, everyone who's listening into the Civil Talk podcast.
Yes, I mean, I would say that this work is transformational when you are able to develop your emotional intelligence, your hard skills, to really apply them on a regular basis. It makes you a happier person, you have better relationships, and it also makes you more focused, more motivated, more productive. So it has so many benefits, and you can learn it at any time. So you can be a student in college, or you can be a parent, you can be a grandma. Like, no matter your age, it's never too late to learn these skills. So if you are interested, go ahead, give it a try, because I think you won't regret it.
I love that. That's amazing. I love that. And I feel like as we're getting older, we're like, oh, we can't learn these skills and it's too late. And I love that you reinforce that that's not the case. And we had a guest on a while ago, we were talking about neuroplasticity, and synapses are forming and shaping, and it's in conjunction with dopamine, and it's totally possible to learn these new skills. Opening the heart is a lifelong process, and I really love that your work really tries to focus on that. So thank you so much for joining us today on this episode. We really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Yeah. And to our listeners, if you're interested in, learning these skills that we've talked about today and diving deeper into Dr. Martinez's approach, we really recommend picking up a copy of her book, Teaching with the Heart in Mind. We are going to link all of her work on our website. It's packed with lovely, actionable strategies to integrate SEL into your teaching, parenting practice, and beyond. Our website is www.civiltalk.com/podcast. We will link all of her work there. Please make sure to check it out. Thank you again, Dr. Martinez, for sharing your expertise with us today. And thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and share this episode with anyone who might benefit from learning more about civility and SEL. Until next time, keep striving for civility and empathy in all that you do.